Hello students, welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Very recently, World Bank has given a report by the title of Ease of Doing Business report, as per which India has been ranked at 77th position out of 190 countries. So in this particular video, we'll have a discussion related to all the facets related to the concept of ease of doing business. Now, before I get into the points that I'll be discussing in this particular video, I just want to mention some of the very important points that have been given in the title page of the Ease of Doing Business report published by World Bank. One, it is also referred to as a Doing Business report. That is the first point. Second point, this is the 16th edition of this particular report. That is, it is the 16th time that particular World Bank has been publishing this particular report. Third, the theme of this particular year's report is training for reform. Fourth point, it has considered 190 countries or 190 economies for which the rankings have been given. And as already mentioned, fifth point is it is a flagship report of World Bank. So these are the 5 points which are important from examination perspective. For example, UPSC may simply ask you in the next prelims about the theme of this particular report or the edition of this particular report. Or it may even ask a simple question wherein he may simply say the Ease of Doing Business report or Doing Business report is published by which authority. So these are some of the important points in the title page itself. Now let's have a look at the points that I'll be covering in this particular lecture. One, let's have a brief introduction related to the concept of ease of doing business. After that, what are the benefits of measuring this particular ease of doing business? Third, how has India fared over a period of time, especially in this particular year's report? Next, are there any areas where Indian government needs to implement reforms? And finally, how effective are these particular rankings? Should we give a lot of focus to it? Should we just take into consideration these particular rankings when we are making the reforms and implementing them? Or should we simply ignore these particular rankings? And finally, once we have looked at all of this, we'll have a look at the preliminary questions as well as descriptive questions. So let me begin with the concept of ease of doing business. As already mentioned, it is an annual exercise conducted by World Bank wherein it will basically conduct an empirical research. That is, the representatives of the World Bank will go to all these member countries or these particular countries and conduct the research, that is, approach, let's say, consultants, lawyers, government officials, accountants, etc. and seek their opinion about the reforms which have been implemented by their respective countries. What kind of an opinion is asked? Whether these particular reforms have promoted the ease of business, that is it easier to do business now compared to, let's say, last year, or these particular reforms have not yielded any kind of results, rather than easing the business, have they made it more difficult to conduct business in these particular countries? So basically this kind of an feedback is taken, and based on their particular feedback, rankings are given to these particular countries. In simple terms, you can say that more the conduciveness of this particular environment to conduct business, more will be the better ranking given to this particular economy. So based on what particular parameters these particular rankings are given, usually the report takes into consideration 11 parameters or 11 areas. But having said so, please remember this, for this year's report, that is Ease of Doing Business report for 2019, rather than 11 parameters, only 10 parameters have been considered. Now let's look at the 11 parameters first. First is starting a business, labor market regulation, dealing with construction permits, getting electricity, registering property, getting credit, protecting minority investors, trading across border, paying taxes, enforcing contracts, and finally resolving insolvency. These are the 11 parameters or 11 areas wherein the research will be conducted, the feedback will be taken, marks will be given, then the rankings will be allocated to these particular countries. But having said so, as already mentioned, I said that for this year's report, all the 11 parameters have not been considered, only 10 parameters has been considered. So which is the parameter which has been omitted in this particular year's report? It is the labor market regulation which has not been considered in the report for the year 2019. That is a recently published report. So this is the basic introduction of ease of doing business. Now, what is the importance of this particular report? The World Bank has stated that over a period of time, that is from the year 2003, when the first report was published, the countries have been implementing huge amount of reforms. So far in the last 16, that is including even the recent one, in the last 16 reports, more than 3,500 reforms have been implemented by various governments in these particular 11 areas itself. And in this particular year only, that is for the year 2019, the report which has been published very recently, more than 300 reforms have been implemented by all the countries under consideration. And India alone has implemented more than 35 reforms. To be more precise, 37 reforms in the last 1 year, which will be considered for ranking under ease of doing business report for 2019. So this is a basic introduction of ease of doing business report. Now, what are the benefits of these particular rankings? One, basically it will lead to improvement of image of this particular country in the global market. For example, if I'm a foreign investor, I'm thinking of investing in various markets. One of the parameters, I repeat, one of the parameters I'll be looking at is how easy it is to get, let's say, licenses in this particular country, how easy it is to acquire, let's say, land in this particular country, how easy it is to get electricity connection, how easy it is to pay taxes in these particular countries, so on and so forth. So one of the parameters that will indicate whether the country's environment is conducive or not is the ranking of the country in ease of doing business report. So that is one advantage or the benefit of having a better ranking. Second, obviously better the ranking, it will attract a lot of investments. For example, in case of New Zealand, it has been stated that as per the latest report, it takes just 1 day to register property. Now, if I am an investor who gives a very high weightage to the easiness of acquiring land as well as registering property, basically New Zealand will be a preferred destination of investment for me. So it will attract to a certain extent investments. Third, the governments over a period of time have implemented reforms. No doubt. For example, the government of India in the last 1 year itself, that is the reference period for this particular report, has implemented around 37 reforms. Now, how do you evaluate the effectiveness of these particular reforms? One of the ways of measuring the effectiveness of these particular reforms is whether India's ranking has been improved as a result of these particular reforms or not. And finally, it will also indicate the areas where the government of India needs to implement the reforms. For example, the India's ranking in around 4 parameters has not been satisfactory. So the government of India will have a look into these particular parameters, try to implement more reforms in the coming year so as to ensure that the ease of doing business will improve over a period of time. So these are the benefits of having EODB index. So what has been the performance of India in this particular report? First, we'll have a look at the performance over a period of time, and then we'll have a look at the performance of Indian economy only in the report which has been recently published. First things first, India's ranking over a period of time has improved. No doubt regarding this. There's been a huge jump in the India's ranking in the last couple of years itself. One of the reasons there has been a huge jump in India's ranking is that Government of India repeatedly has stated that they want to ensure that India will be ranked in the top 50 countries in this particular report. As a result of this, they have implemented huge amount of reforms which are considered under this particular parameters, as a result of which there has been a jump in the rankings for Indian economy. In the year 2014, India was ranked at 142nd position. By 2018, it has reached 77th position or 77th rank. In simple terms, more than 50 ranks have been jumped by Indian economy in just a span of 4 years. That is a very good news for Indian economy. Apart from this, in the recently published report, in which parameters Indian government or Indian economy has performed well and in which parameters there has been unsatisfactory improvements. The good outcomes have been observed mainly in dealing with construction permits. The India's rank has suddenly improved from 181st position in the year 2017 to 52nd position for 2018. Apart from this, another very important jump has been observed in trading across borders, where India's rank has suddenly improved from 146th position to 80th position. Now, apart from this, somewhat satisfactory improvement has been observed in starting a business, enforcing contracts, getting credit as well as getting electricity connection. Whereas on the other side, registering property, there has been a worsening of the ranking. Again, I am simply saying worsening of the ranking. Doesn't mean that the performance has been very bad. Please understand this. Your ranking in these particular parameters might fall despite implementing reforms. For a simple reason, other countries also have implemented reforms which are comparatively better than your reforms. I can understand this. I'll repeat the statement again. Decrease in the ranking or worsening of the ranking doesn't mean that you have started performing badly under this particular parameter. Your ranking might worsen despite implementing reforms because other countries have also implemented better reforms compared to your reforms. So, registering property, there has been a worsening of the ranking. Paying taxes, despite Government of India implementing reforms such as GST, has worsened. Resolving insolvency, ranking has worsened, and protecting minority investors, ranking has got worsened. Now, I'll take up some of the important parameters and I'll tell you some of the important reforms that has been implemented by Government of India in the last 1 year. In case of construction of permit, which has seen a huge jump in terms of ranking, the time and cost related to the getting the construction permits has suddenly decreased. Not only this, new systems have been put in place both in case of New Delhi as well as Mumbai to give construction permits. I am using New Delhi and Mumbai here for a simple reason. Always remember this. In case of India, the World Bank considers only these two cities for giving ranking. That is to conduct the research and to take the feedback from various stakeholders in the system. Only these two cities are considered. That is the reason I am saying new systems such as single window clearance, online licenses have been introduced in case of New Delhi as well as Mumbai to give construction permits. Not only this, in case of cross-border trade also, there is a huge jump in the ranking. The time taken by importers has been reduced from 264 hours to 97 hours. And in case of exporters, it has been reduced from 106 hours to 66 hours. Apart from this, Government of India has improved the infrastructure in port area. The supporting infrastructure has been improved over a period of time. That is the precise reason that the ranking for India has been improved. Apart from this, starting business, there is a slight jump from 156th rank to 137th rank. That is improvement by 19 positions. That is because the time taken has been reduced from 30 days to 17 days to start a business. So these are the three parameters where there has been improvement, whereas in the remaining two parameters, the ranking has worsened. For example, registering a property, now it would take around 69 days and cost around 8% of the value of the asset to register this particular property. Whereas in case of other countries, it is much easier to register property. For example, the topmost ranked in this particular report, that is New Zealand, in case of this particular country, it takes just 1 day to register property. In case of paying taxes, despite Government of India implementing a revolutionary reform such as GST, the annual time taken to file taxes has increased from 214 hours. As a result of this, you can see that the paying taxes ranking has worsened in case of India. So these are some of the parameters for this particular year's report in respect to India's performance. Please be very careful. UPSC may ask you a question. For example, he may simply ask you, out of which of the following parameters in ease of doing business report, India's performance has improved in the latest report, or India's performance has worsened in the ranking in this year's report. He might give you 3 or 5 indicators or parameters and he might ask you the multiple choice question based on it. So this is related to the performance of ease of doing business. Further, if I look at what has been the special feature associated with India's performance in this particular year's report. Some of these special features are, it has jumped by 23 positions. I've already mentioned this. The highest improvement, 53 ranks in last 2 years. India is recognized as among one of the top improving countries, not only in this particular year's report, even in the previous year's report, it has been recognized. That is, in simple terms, consecutively for 2 years, it has been recognized as the most improving country. This is one of the special features or distinguishing features for the country India, which is part of BRICS as well as South Asian country. Now, apart from this, that is, apart from India, what are the other countries which have been recognized in this particular year's report as improving countries? So, India is one of the 10 countries. Apart from India, there is China. So, remember this, India and China are the two BRICS member countries which have been identified under this year's report as most improving countries. Apart from these two BRICS economies, there is Djibouti, Afghanistan, Togo, Kenya, Turkey, etc. Within BRICS community, India has experienced a huge jump in the ranking in the last 1 year itself. But apart from this, Russia is the best country in terms of ranking in the ease of doing business report within the BRICS community. Apart from this, China has been ranked at 46th position, South Africa at 82nd position, and finally Brazil at 109, that is 109 position. This is a basic discussion that you need to understand and remember from the perspective of UPSC exams. Now, what are the areas where India needs to improve? One, the time taken to start a business is even today higher. No doubt, it has reduced from 30 days to 17 days. In case of OECD economies, the time taken to start a business is around 12 days. So, there is still a long way for Government of India, or there is a scope for Government of India to improve or to perform better in this particular parameter. Second, there is a need of stabilizing GST as well as insolvency and bankruptcy code. No doubt, both of these particular reforms are revolutionary in nature. Having said so, there is a need of stabilizing both of these particular reforms. For example, in case of a GST, remember this, the biggest problem with respect to implementation of GST has been providing input tax credit, which has been disrupting this particular system of medium and small sized industries. Whereas in case of IBC, over a period of time, it has been found that the time period on an average taken for insolvency resolution is more than 270 days, which is prescribed under law. Second, the creditors, especially the creditors who have given a dissent with respect to the Committee of Creditors voting, they have approached NCLT as well as NCLAT, or in simple terms, judiciary, and have ensured that the time period will be extended or will go beyond 270 days. The recovery, despite introduction of IBC, has been still unsatisfactory in case of the creditors in India. So, there is a need of having a stabilization in the GST as well as IBC. As already mentioned, in case of GST, I have already stated that despite implementing GST, the time taken to file annual returns has increased in case of India. So, there is a need of stabilization of these particular reforms. Next, India needs to perform very well in terms of enforcement of contracts. For example, this year's report states that in case of India, to implement or to enforce a contract, it takes more than 4 years. That is approximately more than 1445 days. And it will consume more than 30% of the value of the project itself. Whereas in case of OECD economies, it is somewhere in the range of 580 days, and it will cost them around 21% of the cost of the project. So, there is a huge need of enforcement of the contract. Next, one of the biggest problems with respect to implementation of these particular business projects has been the land acquisition in case of India. The biggest problem has been that India doesn't have a very good framework of land acquisition. No doubt, Government of India has implemented a Land Acquisition, Rehabilitation and Resettlement Act of 2013. But despite having implemented this, even today, acquiring land has been one of the biggest problems of the business community. In recent times itself, we have found that acquiring land for a project such as industrial corridor or bullet train project has been very problematic in case of India. So Government of India has to implement more reforms to promote easier land acquisition. Next, supporting infrastructure such as logistics have to be taken care of. For example, in case of India, it has been found that logistics account for 14% of GDP, which is a very high number compared to the cost of logistics in, let's say, China, or for that matter, developed economies. So there is a need of improvement of this particular supporting infrastructure. Next, as per the Global Manufacturing Index, which is published by World Economic Forum, India has been ranked at 30th position. And this particular report states that the biggest two challenges for Indian economy will be: one, ensuring electricity supply, that is sustainable electricity supply, and second, human labor challenge. And in the same report, which was very recently published, it has been found that India's ranking is lesser or lower compared to its competitors such as China, Thailand, etc. So there is a need of huge improvement or implementation of reforms by Government of India even in the manufacturing sector. So these are some of the areas where Government of India should implement the reforms if it wants to ensure that India's rank or India ranks in the top 50 countries in the ease of doing business report. Now let's have a look at how effective are these particular rankings. Should we allocate a huge amount of importance or nominal importance to these particular rankings? First and foremost, while surveying how easier it is to do business in these particular various economies, the World Bank takes into consideration only the small and medium-sized enterprises. Whereas there are so many proprietorships, there are so many other forms of companies which are established in case of India. These particular experiences of these units or enterprises are not considered while ranking India. That is one. Second, as already mentioned, the World Bank takes into consideration the performance of the small and medium-sized enterprises only in two particular cities, that is Mumbai and New Delhi. And please remember this, what has been the situation around India, that is in other states, other cities, with respect to the small and medium-sized enterprises, let's say to acquire property, labor regulation, getting electricity connection, so on and so forth, is not reflected in the situation in these two particular cities, that is Mumbai and New Delhi. Third, the methodology of calculation keeps on changing from one time period to the next time period. For example, I've already mentioned that in this particular year's report, the World Bank has not considered labor regulation or labor market as one of the parameters. Now, these kind of changes in the methodology makes it very difficult to make a comparison between two countries over a period of time or between the same country across the space. That is, from 2015 to 2017, if I want to have a comparison, if there is a change in the methodology of calculation, it doesn't make any sense to make a comparison. Fourth, the ranking just shows comparison amongst the countries. That is, rather than being only focused on the ranking, we should be focused more on the concept of a distance to frontier. Please understand this, distance to frontier is nothing but the overall score given to these particular economies. Why? Please remember this, despite having a higher score compared to last year, your ranking might get worsened. I'll repeat the statement again. Despite having a better score compared to a previous year, your ranking may get worsened. Why? Let's say a country A score has increased from 60 points or 60 marks to 61 marks, which means at least to a certain extent, there has been improved situation of ease of doing business in the country A. Whereas another country B, which was ranked lower compared to country A in the last year's report, if the marks scored or given to this particular economy is slightly higher than 61, there will be a gap between the ranking of country A and the ranking of country B. So please understand this. The better indicator for measuring the ease of doing business will not be the ranking, rather it will be the score, that is the distance to frontier score by individual countries. In that particular situation, India has really done well compared to last year itself. For example, in the last year, India's score was in the range of around 60 plus points, and this year it has been more than 67 points, which simply means the performance or the ease of doing business has improved in case of India. Next, it doesn't take into consideration various important macroeconomic parameters such as skilled labor availability, what has been the impact of a global financial crisis on Indian economy, what is the impact of a rupee depreciation on Indian economy, what is the impact of a trade deficit, what is the impact of all the other regulations or the reforms implemented by Government of India. These kind of macroeconomic situations or parameters are not taken into consideration, but nevertheless, all of these will have an impact on ease of doing business in India. Next, the ranking does not reflect the performance of these particular countries in the index with the performance of these particular countries in terms of, let's say, growth rates achieved as well as FDI inflows attracted. For example, China for the first time has been ranked in the top 50 performing countries in this particular report. But having said so, China has been one country with the highest GDP growth rates in the last 2 decades as well as a country with the highest inflow of FDI. So if China is achieving a very high GDP growth rate as well as has been able to attract a lot of FDI, why the ranking of China was not in the top 50 countries in the last 15 rounds? So that is another issue with this particular ranking. And finally, by promoting this particular concept of ease of doing business index, are we promoting a race to the bottom where there will be no regulation on these particular enterprises? Because please understand, more the ease of doing business means the reforms or the regulations which have been put in place by various governments over a period of time, these particular reforms either have been withdrawn or the regulations have been dismantled. So basically, by dismantling these particular regulatory measures, are we giving a free hand to the private sector to operate in the economy? So are we basically promoting a race to the bottom of deregulation? That has been one of the concerns of various experts with respect to this kind of a focus by Government of India on the concept of ease of doing business. Apart from this, there is also another concern that in the process of getting a very good ranking in the ease of doing business index, are we basically diverting our focus or the attention from structural reforms to those reforms which are only counted in this particular ranking? For example, as already mentioned, one of the report by World Economic Forum states that the human labor challenge will be the biggest challenge for India. But this particular concept of a human labor challenge in the form of labor regulation was not even considered in this particular report for the year 2019. So should Government of India run behind this particular ranking and implement only those reforms which will be accounted or counted under this particular ranking? So there is a dichotomy which has been created because of this kind of a ranking. So these are some of the issues on the various facets related to the concept of ease of doing business report. Now let's have a look at the questions starting with multiple choice question. First one is a straightforward question. Which of the following publish the ease of doing business report? IMF, WTO, WEF and World Bank. The right option will be World Bank, that is option D. Second question. Consider the following statements. India stands at 77th position in the 15th edition of Ease of Doing Business report. Second statement, India is one of the 10 countries with the most improvement in recently published EODB report. Some of the other countries which have such distinction are China, Djibouti, Kenya, Togo. The first statement is wrong. Please don't look at only the ranking, that is the 77th position, because it says in the 15th edition. As already mentioned in the beginning itself, it is the 16th edition in which India has been ranked at 77th position. Whereas in case of a 15th edition, India was ranked at 100th position. So please be very careful. Second statement, India is one of the top 10 countries or 10 countries with the most improvement in the recently published EODB report. Some other countries with such distinctions are China, Djibouti, Kenya, Togo. First part of the statement is correct. Second part of the statement is also correct. Have a look at the table which I have given in the PPT. So the second statement is correct. Choose the correct option. Only one is true. No, only two is true. The right option will be option B. Third question. Consider the following statements regarding ease of doing business report. First, ease of doing business report 2019 has evaluated 190 economies or 190 countries. Correct. Second statement, India stands at 77th rank as per the latest report. Correct. Third statement, in case of India, it covers experience of all the registered entities under the Companies Act. No, we have already discussed this. It doesn't take into consideration partnerships, which are one of the major types of entities which are registered in India. So the third statement is wrong. First statement, second statements are true. Choose the right option. Option B will be the right option. Let's have a look at the descriptive question. First one, the improvement in the ease of doing business rankings must be byproduct rather than the target of public policy. This is one of the statements given by the World Bank itself, wherein it has stated that those countries which have performed very well on these particular rankings are the ones which had a larger agenda of reforms. These particular countries wanted to implement a large set of reforms, and as a result of the implementation of these particular reforms, their rankings in the ease of doing business report has increased. And it warns against using these particular rankings as the sole criteria of making investment. The World Bank states that these rankings are just an indicators which should be taken into consideration as a part of the overall analysis done by the investors. So basically understand this. World Bank states, implement a larger reforms agenda, your rankings will improve, rather than having only target of improving the ranking, and to improve the ranking, don't implement the reforms. So this is the first question. Second question, though India is one of the most improved countries in the recently published UIDBR, there's still a long way to go before it literally becomes easy to do business in India. As already mentioned, no doubt, India is one of the top countries which have had a very good improvements in the last 2 years in terms of rankings and ease of doing business. But having said so, even today, there have been certain issues which are affecting these particular entities in India. For example, getting quality electricity supply, enforcement of contracts, land acquisition, so on and so forth. And all these particular parameters will definitely have an impact on how easier it is to do business in India. For example, the criticism is that the rankings do not consider the corruption which exists in these particular economies. And no doubt, higher the corruption which persists in the economy, it will be very difficult to conduct the business. So basically understand this, there's a still long way, or the government of India has to implement more reforms in the coming days to ensure that it is very easy to do business on the ground level rather than only achieving a better ranking in the report. So this is the second question. So these are the two descriptive questions along with the multiple choice question, and this is the overall discussion related to the concept of ease of doing business report. Thank you. Have a good day.